David's hands trembled as he straightened his tie in the restaurant's bathroom mirror. At 42, he'd convinced himself that love had passed him by, that his chance for connection had dissolved somewhere between building his career and forgetting to build a life. His sister had set up this blind date, insisting with that particular brand of sibling certainty that he needed to get back out there. Now, staring at the gray threading through his temples and the worry lines creasing his forehead, he wondered if he'd made a terrible mistake. The woman waiting at table 7 was stunning. Not in the polished, intimidating way that made him feel inadequate, but in something softer, more genuine. She had kind eyes and a nervous smile that matched his own anxiety. As David approached, she stood, and he noticed her hands were shaking too. "David," she asked. "That's me. You must be Sarah." They shook hands awkwardly, then sat. The first 15 minutes passed in the usual dance of first date small talk. She was a pediatric nurse. He was an architect. She loved hiking. He preferred old movies. They both laughed at the same moment when the waiter brought bread and they reached for the same piece. But then, as David was describing a building project downtown, Sarah tilted her head in a way that seemed familiar. Her expression shifted, becoming distant, almost wistful. "You don't remember me, do you?" she said quietly. David's fork paused halfway to his mouth. His mind raced through high school yearbooks, college parties, professional conferences. Nothing clicked. "I'm sorry, it's okay. It was a long time ago. And it was just one day." Sarah's eyes glistened slightly. "But it was the most important day of my life." The restaurant noise faded. David leaned forward, searching her face. "I don't understand." Sarah took a deep breath. 15 years ago. December 14th. "Do you remember where you were?" December 14th. David's mind traveled back, sorting through the archives of memory. Then it hit him like a physical blow. "The bridge," he whispered. "The bridge," Sarah confirmed. David's throat tightened. He rarely let himself think about that day. He'd been driving home from work, exhausted from a brutal week, when he'd seen a figure standing on the wrong side of the railing of the Morrison Bridge. Something had made him pull over. Something had compelled him to get out of his car in the freezing rain. "You were wearing a green coat," David said slowly, the memory crystallizing. "You were crying." "I was 23, Sarah said, her voice barely above a whisper. "I'd just lost my job. My boyfriend had left me. My mother had died 6 months earlier, and I was drowning in medical debt from her treatment. I felt so alone. So completely, utterly alone." David remembered the terror in his chest as he'd approached her, afraid that any wrong word would tip the balance. He'd talked to her for over an hour in that freezing rain, water streaming down both their faces. He'd told her about his own brother, who'd struggled with depression. He'd talked about his mother's chocolate chip cookies and bad jokes and how the smallest things could matter. He'd offered his jacket, his phone, his time, anything to keep her talking, to keep her on the right side of that railing. "You told me about fireflies," Sarah said, and David felt his eyes burning. "You said your brother once told you that even in the darkest nights, there are these tiny lights that keep showing up, keep glowing, keep trying. And you said that people could be fireflies for each other." "I didn't think you'd remember," David managed. "Remember?" "David, I remember every word. When I finally climbed back over that railing, you drove me to the hospital. You stayed until my aunt arrived. You gave me your number and told me to call if I ever needed to talk." Sarah reached across the table, her hand stopping just short of his. "I was too ashamed to call. But I kept that number. I carried it in my wallet for years." "What happened?" "After that night, everything," Sarah said simply. "I got help. Real help. Therapy, medication, a support group. It took time, but I rebuilt my life piece by piece. I went back to school. Became a nurse because I wanted to help people the way you helped me. I wanted to be someone's firefly." David felt tears rolling down his cheeks, not caring that they were in a crowded restaurant. "I think about that night sometimes. I always wondered if I did enough. If I said the right things." "You did everything," Sarah said fiercely. "You saw me. When I felt invisible to the entire world, you saw me. You treated me like I mattered. You did matter. You do matter." Sarah smiled, truly smiled, and it transformed her face. "When your sister called me, we work at the same hospital, and said she wanted to set her brother up on a date, I almost said no. Then she showed me your picture and told me your name. I couldn't believe it. She doesn't know. David asked. No one knows except my therapist and my aunt. I was too embarrassed for years, and then it felt like old history. But you, I've thought about you so many times. The stranger who saved my life. I didn't save you, David said. You saved yourself. I just stood there with you for a while. Sometimes that's everything. Sarah finally closed the distance, covering his hand with hers. You know what's strange? I came tonight terrified you'd remember me only as that broken girl on a bridge. That you'd see me and only see that worst moment. I see someone incredibly brave, David said. I see someone who fought her way back. I see someone who turned pain into purpose. They sat in silence for a moment, hands clasped across the table, while the restaurant buzzed around them. The waiter approached nervously, clearly confused by the tears, but retreated when Sarah waved him away with a laugh. So, Sarah said, wiping her eyes. This is probably the weirdest first date you've ever been on. David laughed, a sound that seemed to release years of tension. It's the best first date I've ever been on. They talked for 3 more hours. Not about that night on the bridge, but about everything else. Sarah's work with sick children, the small victories and heartbreaks. David's designs, his dream of creating buildings that felt like homes. They discovered a shared love of terrible puns and Korean food in old Hitchcock films. They argued playfully about whether dogs were better than cats. They made each other laugh until their sides hurt. When the restaurant finally began closing, they walked outside into the cool night air. The city sparkled around them, full of possibility. Can I see you again? David asked. I'd like that, Sarah said. Maybe we could go hiking next weekend. I want to show you this trail I found. In the summer, there are fireflies. David smiled, understanding the significance. Fireflies sound perfect. As he drove home later, David thought about chance and choice, about the moments that change everything. He'd pulled over that day 15 years ago without knowing why, following an instinct he couldn't name. That single act of attention, of caring, had rippled forward through time in ways he never could have imagined. We never really know how our kindness travels through the world. We offer our hand in someone's darkness and then move on, unaware that we've lit a spark that might grow into a flame. Sarah had taken that spark and built a life of meaning around it. And now, impossibly, she was offering him a chance to be part of that light. David realized something as the city lights blurred past. He'd spent 15 years thinking of himself as just a bystander to someone else's crucial moment. But maybe he'd been wrong. Maybe that night had saved 2 people. His phone buzzed. A text from Sarah. Thank you. For then, for now, for everything. See you soon, Firefly. David typed back with steady hands. See you soon. The road ahead was dark, but there were lights everywhere, once you knew how to look for them.